The United States escorts 10 to 20 million barrels of oil through the Strait of Hormuz every night. This is now an undisputed fact. This means the blockade of the strait is virtually resolved. And 3 signs from Iran show that Trump's policy of containment without war is hitting them where it hurts. Iran is starting to show weakness. How so? What makes you say that? All right, that's the first topic I'm bringing to you today. Also, the negotiations between the US and Canada have collapsed. What's going on there? And what are the consequences of this failure? That's the most critical topic for today. Additionally, Trump's overhaul of various US institutions, including educational and legal systems, is now targeting the American Bar Association and law schools. So what exactly is the situation? This is the topic Fang Wei is bringing to you today. Welcome to Good Morning America with Fang Wei. Yes, Good Morning America. Hello to our YouTube viewers and our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. It's Saturday, so everyone at home can relax a bit. I'll try to relax a bit too. A viewer asked me a question yesterday. Let me tell you what it was. Actually, I'll get to that later. All right, let's get straight to the point. Is Iran backing down? Is the US winning without a fight? With a question mark, of course. What's really happening? First, let's look at Iran's 3 reactions from yesterday. First, the Iranian president issued a public letter. His name is Pezeshkian, right? He made a public appeal, calling for an end to the war. He was speaking to an internal Iranian audience during a speech at the Iranian Medical Association, or Islamic Association. He said that while Iran is still in a position of strength, they need to find a way to end the conflict. Since we are still powerful and respected, and the world recognizes our victory, we should wrap things up now. That's the gist. He also addressed criticisms regarding inflation and other economic issues caused by the war, stating that those who support confrontational policies must accept the consequences they bring. Basically, he was telling the hard truth internally and it leaked out. Let me correct myself. It wasn't a public letter, but a public speech. Secondly, Iran announced again that it would withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT. To me, saying this is actually a sign of weakness. First of all, Iran doesn't even have nuclear weapons. If you don't have them, what are you doing? Withdrawing from a non-proliferation treaty? So that's the first point. Secondly, Iran has said this 3 times between 2025 and this year. All talk and no action. If you're going to say it, then do it. But they don't, because withdrawing would make them a global pariah. So just talking about it might seem powerful, but in the current situation, saying it again just makes them look incredibly weak and powerless. Additionally, Iran is accusing the US of practicing what they call classic colonialism. They're calling the US economic blockade of Iran colonialism. I just can't figure out what this economic blockade has to do with colonialism. Which name did the US point to in Iran? Saying this just shows that Iran is really getting desperate, you know? Meanwhile, Iran's central bank governor, Hemmati, admitted on state TV on August 19th that due to sanctions, oil exports have stopped and revenue is near zero. And according to the MOU reached with Washington, that Memorandum of Understanding, the $12 billion in assets expected to be released haven't seen a single cent arrive yet. Furthermore, Iran's tax and social security revenues have dropped, and the pressure on foreign exchange cash is severe. Hemmati admitted that the current economic difficulties are the highest they've been during his entire tenure. He also said that the supply of basic goods and medicine is temporarily guaranteed, and there's no total market shortage yet. Of course, he left a lot out, like the military not getting paid and the government being broke. He didn't mention the worst-case scenarios, but these admissions show Iran is very fragile right now. Okay, the key is the third point. On Saturday, the Iranian state news agency reported that Iran has allowed several Iraqi tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. It's still unclear exactly how many Iraqi ships have received Iran's approval to pass through the strait. But the Iraqi president, Saleh, has confirmed this. Yes, that is indeed what's happening. So how does the Iranian government explain this? They say their speaker, Ghalibaf, received a request from Iraq during his recent visit. So they're granting Iraqi tankers a special transit permit. Before the war broke out, Iraq's daily oil production was about 4 million barrels, which accounted for, what was it? 1/5 of the Gulf's total output, and most of that was exported through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, now I have to ask you all, why did they agree to this? Why do you think they agree? You might say it's because Iraq asks, like they explained. Oh, so you just agree because Iraq asks? Every Gulf country asks for that, right? We all want to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, but do you let us? So what did Iraq give Iran in exchange for letting their ships through? They let the ships pass, but they didn't really get anything back. So how do you all explain the situation? Tell me what you think. Should we leave a comment? I'll pause for a moment. While I pause, if you're not interested in answering, why not hit that subscribe button? Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Anyway, let's take a guess. Why did they let Iraqi ships in? Controlling that strait is a huge leverage point. So why stop now and give Iraq a pass? It's true. Iran uses the strait to choke the world and wants to choke Trump. So why are they letting go now? In my view, it's because they can't choke it off anyway. With 10 to 20 million barrels of US crude moving through every night, Iran is essentially blind. They're just squinting through binoculars in the dark, trying to spot ships 20 kilometers away. Think about it. If we go to the beach in the middle of the night, can you really tell if a ship is passing by 10 or 20 kilometers away? So Iran is basically flying blind right now. They can't get through either way, and even if they do, they're intercepted by the US military. So ships are still moving in and out of the strait every day. Since they can't block it anyway, they might as well make a friendly gesture first to gain some diplomatic favor. I think that's the situation, but I'm not sure what you think about it. All right, and then there's President Trump's attitude. First, this economic encirclement is being executed very aggressively. We've seen the reactions from the Iranian president and the head of their central bank, saying they're feeling immense pressure. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent issued a threat on X, saying any country that continues to maintain ties with Tehran, whether voluntarily or by turning a blind eye, is pushing its own economy toward total ruin. Wow, that's some very strong language. Any country that doesn't support this offensive, this American economic D-Day, will be seen as standing in opposition to us. In media interviews, Bessent specifically called on the CCP to align itself with us. Now, we all know that before the war broke out, over 80% of Iran's oil exports went to China. And since the war, despite the sanctions, Iran is still exporting oil to China through its shadow fleet. China remains the most important consumer and the largest buyer of Iranian oil. In return, the CCP provides Iran with weapons, including precursors for rockets and missiles. What are precursors? They're various raw materials that you just need to assemble, just like the precursors used for fentanyl. And of course, that includes complete weapon systems. The time that US F-15 Strike Eagle was shot down, CCP weapons were used. So how is Beijing reacting to all of this now? On Friday, Beijing stated that US sanctions and pressure are not the right way to solve the problem, calling for both sides to resolve their differences through negotiation. That's just typical Beijing officialese. It's useless talk that doesn't really say anything at all. But you can read between the lines that they won't respond to the US, or at least not in a positive way. Given this, Xi Jinping's visit to the US will be very interesting to watch. You see, this meeting between Xi and Trump, or this showdown, isn't being arranged by the CCP. It's being set up by the US. So we'll see how it goes. Whether Xi dares to sit in the White House with Trump in front of 15 reporters will be quite a spectacle. We're looking forward to seeing that on September 24th. Talks between Canada and the US collapsed. Wednesday was the deadline, but President Trump announced a 3-day extension, saying a deal was close. Well, the 3 days passed and the talks fell apart. So Carney said, "I'm pulling my negotiating team back to Ottawa." They're done talking, and now it's on to reciprocal tariff retaliation. Okay, so what exactly were these negotiations about? They were about $20 billion worth of Canadian exports to the US that will face a 50% tariff if a new deal isn't reached. As you know, this accounts for Canada's entire US trade with the US. 92% of it is completely duty-free, or almost completely duty-free. It's covered by what's called the USMCA, this trade agreement. In the early days, it was called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. During Trump 1.0, it became the USMCA. So the vast majority of trade between the US and Mexico and the US and Canada is covered by that thing. So what's being discussed now is 5% of that remaining 8% outside of the 92%. That's what this talk is about. But this talk is very important. If these $20 billion don't work out as expected, it will immediately affect the 92% of Canadian goods exported to the US under the USMCA. Okay, let's first talk about what the reason actually is. Everyone is curious, how did the talks break down? So in the end, who was being unreasonable? Who couldn't take it anymore? How did they make it so Carney couldn't stand it? Let me tell you, Carney wrote a long 2.5-page letter to explain to everyone what exactly happened. I was also full of anticipation. After I read the entire 2.5-page letter very carefully, I'll give you the conclusion. Canadian Prime Minister Carney said that the changes made by the US side to the proposed terms at the last minute were neither fair nor economically logical and called the reliability of any agreement into question. I have decided to suspend trade negotiations with the US and have instructed the Canadian negotiating team to return home. Then he said that at midnight tonight, the US will impose a 50% tariff on $28 billion worth of Canadian goods. Okay, it's not $20 billion, it's $28 billion. Canada will impose equivalent sanctions, dollar for dollar, that is to say, to protect our workers and businesses. I looked through the whole thing and only saw this one sentence related to how the talks failed, which is that the US side proposed corrections at the last minute that were neither fair nor economically logical. I just don't get what exactly it was. If it's so unreasonable, write it out. But he didn't. Just this one sentence, nothing else. The rest is just some explanation to the public about the situation. So what does it say next? He said Canada's economy is accelerating, and in the next 2 years, we are expected to become the second fastest growing economy in the group of 7. Our job creation rate is 4 times that of the US, and exports to markets outside the US are expected to double in the next 10 years. Canada's foreign direct investment has reached its highest level in 20 years, double that of its closest Group of 7 competitor. To be honest, these very optimistic figures he mentioned, none of them match my understanding of the Canadian economy. I don't know why he's saying these things. Canada's economic growth is accelerating. From what I know, Canada's economic growth is in a state of stagnation and contraction. In the next 2 years, we are expected to become the second fastest growing economy in the group of 7. This so expected, how do you even define that, right? Is there a 99% chance of this expectation or a 1% chance? Both are possible. This sentence is basically useless. Canada's job creation rate is 4 times that of the US. I just don't get it. Really? I don't know what you mean. The US job creation rate is different every month. What is he referring to? So our Canadian friends can leave a comment. Tell us what you think about Carney's outlook for the future. What he means is, since we're so strong, why even bother talking to the Americans? All right, let's switch gears and look at what the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative said in their announcement, which they also posted on X. It says that despite the U.S. offering Canada the most favorable treatment any major exporter could get in the U.S. market, Canada's new demands and backtracking on other commitments have upset the balance carefully struck over the past few days. Furthermore, Canada continues to maintain long-standing retaliatory measures against the U.S., including direct bans on certain American goods and services. Okay, it says for decades, Canada has enjoyed the most favorable access to the U.S. market of any country. Since President Trump's trade plan launched, even though Canada retaliated against the U.S. just like China did, the U.S. still gave it the most favorable treatment in the world. Then this week, the U.S. agreed to give Canada even better treatment, proposing massive, significant tariff cuts on steel, aluminum, cars, and lumber. The U.S. proposal also includes a historic economic and national security partnership, cooperating on export controls, fighting transshipment, strengthening digital trade, and coordinating certain external tariffs. And this proposal will also formally announce the start of renegotiations for the USMCA. Regarding Canada's withdrawal now, Greer said that for Canada, this is a missed opportunity to build a partnership with the U.S. That's the U.S. stance. Who do you all think makes more sense? Next, I'll mention a third-party comment, but I'm just picking one person. I really like this guy. He's a big account on X that I follow often. His name is James Thorne, Mr. James Thorne. He's the chief economic strategist at a famous Canadian investment bank called Wellington Altus. He quickly wrote an article saying that Canada's leadership needs to separate anger from economic policy. They shouldn't be lumped together. He said President Trump is focused on economic sovereignty. He's focused on doing business, not on personal grudges. He said, I thought Prime Minister Carney knew this. He spent enough time in markets and capital to know that a country can't just posture its way out of a competitiveness crisis. Yet Ottawa has turned to symbolism and performative retaliation to show its strength. So it seems my view, my interpretation of him, was wrong. He said the core for Canada, the core strategic goal is very clear: to secure the pipeline into the U.S., the world's largest and most dynamic market. And the U.S. is Canada's neighbor and the cornerstone of its export economy. This pipeline isn't just talk. It supports Canada's jobs, investment, supply chains, and growth. Canada focusing on China is an own goal. China can't replace the U.S. It's far away, strategically uncertain, and isolated from Canada geographically, institutionally, and in infrastructure. It can't replicate North American integration, meaning cooperation with the CCP can't match North American integration, including shared energy systems, cross-border capital, integrated factories, common standards, and decades of commercial interdependence. Thune said Canada can't rely on its geographic advantage while trading on emotion. It also can't win a trade war with its largest customer. He said Ottawa could impose targeted costs where it has real leverage to increase costs for the other side. It can negotiate firmly, but broad retaliation isn't a strategy. It's just emotional performance disguised as sound economic policy. He said retaliation for its own sake is an expensive expression of national frustration, and the Canadian people will be the ones to pay the price. He said the deeper issue isn't just pressure from the United States, but Canada's own failures. Canada currently has weak business investment, poor productivity growth, regulatory paralysis, interprovincial trade barriers that are sky high, slow approvals, insufficient infrastructure, and a subsidy culture that protects incumbents instead of rewarding innovation. Canada does have abundant resources, but it lacks strong execution. It has energy, minerals, capital, and technical talent, plus the advantage of being America's neighbor, but it's made investments slower, risks too high, and costs too expensive. The answer isn't surrender, it's reform. Canada needs to deregulate, speed up approvals, and eliminate barriers to capital and internal trade, and so on. That's his commentary. So, as you can see from his comments, he's clearly critical of Prime Minister Carney. So, looking at all this, I've been reading to you for a while, but if you ask me exactly how the two sides fell apart, I can't tell you, right? I haven't seen anything specific. If Carney said the US side proposed something so outrageous at the last minute and said, look, I can't take this, and showed everyone before walking out, he might get some sympathy. Right now, he's just saying they brought up new things at the end, he couldn't take it, and he left. After you walk away, it's not just $28 billion in trade jumping to 50%. From then on, Canada and the US will be at war. Because if you raise it 50%, the US surely will too, right? Then is there even anything left to negotiate regarding the USMCA? So what's next for Canada? This will be a massive disaster for Canada. I'll make a prediction here. I predict Carney will come back and cave. If he doesn't change course, I don't know what it means for Canada. You have to realize that 92% of Canadian goods exported to the US are currently duty-free. They're just fighting over a small fraction. Can our Canadian friends leave a comment and share your thoughts? How do you feel about this ending this way? Because I really can't tell you the specifics of why the talks collapsed. Who exactly is being unreasonable? What I just showed you were the arguments from both sides, third-party commentary, and the idea that Canada is actually doing great, so why bother cooperating with the US? Do you agree with that? Please leave a comment to express your views, okay? Okay, now let's look at Trump's next move. This next move is actually very important, or rather, the meaning behind it is very significant. President Trump just took action to strip the American Bar Association, the ABA, which is the American Bar Association, or the Lawyers Association, of its role, the power to accredit law schools. What does that mean? It means American law schools need an organization to evaluate and inspect them. For a new law school to be approved as a formal one, sorry, give me a second. To become a formal, official law school, it takes 3 to 5 years. After that, it must be reevaluated every 10 years. Evaluated by whom? By the American Bar Association. The ABA. And within the American Bar Association, there's a unit called the Council of the Section of Legal Education and Admissions to the Bar. This council has been recognized by the United States Department of Education since 1952 as a national agency for accrediting JD programs, and it's the only one in the United States. Well, on August 21st, the Department of Education released a 500-page staff report recommending that the ABA's accreditation authority be revoked. So why is that? The reason is that this council has been pushing a so-called progressive agenda and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in law schools. To put it bluntly, it's reverse discrimination, prioritizing diversity over educational equality. As a result, they are recommending the revocation of the ABA's federal authority to accredit nearly 200 law schools nationwide. If this actually happens, what would be the consequences? Of course, the ABA could still accredit, but it would just be a private body without federal authorization. Its authority would be greatly diminished, and law schools it accredits wouldn't be eligible for federal student loans. So moving forward, following this report, the ABA has a chance to appeal to the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity. That committee will review it and then make a recommendation to the Undersecretary, Nicholas Kent, who will make the final decision. So this whole matter is quite technical, so I'll give you a plain English explanation. Trump is moving quickly to shift the direction of various United States institutions while he still has the chance. Looking back, Trump spent a lot of time addressing issues with the Ivy League, then the Smithsonian Institution, and now he's tackling the ABA, the American Bar Association, and the law schools. Earlier, Trump had already sued several major media outlets, forcing them to change their ways one by one. So now, plus Trump is buying up media outlets one by one through Larry Ellison's family, and then he starts making changes. So they're being changed one after another. Because Trump is very clear about the influence the far left has built over United States institutions over the past decades, and he's now striving for a full restoration. So President Trump is in a big hurry to do this, right? The reason is he wants to seize the chance while he still can, because right now the three powers are unified. Not the three powers as in the separation of powers, but the House, the Senate, and the presidency are all under one party. This is a pretty rare event in American history. So he's taking this chance to get it done, because if things change after the midterm elections, it'll be very difficult. So he's rushing to get this done now. You can see it. That's why I've been telling everyone that the November 2024 election is absolutely, well, it's the decisive election for America's future. No matter who wins, they'll change America so much that the other side won't be able to regain control. At least that's the goal, the direction of the effort. So this is part of that. So starting in the 1960s, including what the communists back then called their long march through the institutions, they've long been infiltrating America's, journalism schools, American churches, seminaries, including the American Bar Association and so on, law schools, higher education institutions for a long time, including film schools, Hollywood, and so forth. So by now, they've almost completely taken over America's key ideological institutions. And President Trump, once he wins the election, he wants to flip all of that around. So now these moves are just one part of that whole process. So what do you think? Feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree? All right, for the next piece of news, I think most of our viewers will strongly agree. Now, Texas Governor DeSantis just signed a law requiring Florida students, starting this fall, to learn about the dangers of communism to humanity. Now, you might think, well, isn't that obvious? I'm telling you, it's definitely not. I mean, it's not obvious. It's obviously not the case. American K-12 schools don't teach it at all. They just treat communism as, one of the normal theories of human society. The massive disasters caused by the painful experiments of communism in the 20th century are not taught at all. Kids don't know. I've looked at American middle school textbooks and college textbooks too. They just talk about Marxist theory, like Marx is just one of the theoretical schools, a branch of theory. But in Texas, here's how it is now. Starting in 6th grade, Texas middle schoolers will start learning about the dangers brought by the revolutions in the Soviet Union, the Chinese Communist Party, North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela, and will even include content about Maduro's arrest. Governor DeSantis said what Democratic Socialism, or the DSA, might try to portray Castro as a hero, but our Florida students won't see him that way because we'll teach them what the real story is. You know, in American education, 5% is what? Homeschooling. Then another 9 to 10% is private schools, and 85% are public schools. Public schools are run by the federal government, you know. Public schools are run by the states. The feds provide some funding, so the federal government's influence on public schools is indirect. It has to influence the states and then let each state make its own decisions. Actually, the Bar Association is the same way. Even if you strip away the Bar Association's accreditation, they can still work with individual states. If a state still recognizes them, they can still cooperate with that state. The state is a very important entity, right? But regardless, if things like this start from Texas and Florida and gradually extend state by state, really, communism, in my view, is a cancer for humanity. What do you do about cancer? You either cut it out, right? If you can't cut it out, you need radiation therapy, you need to boost your immunity, right? So if humanity doesn't boost its immunity to communism, humanity will fall again sooner or later, because once cancer starts, it's just unstoppable. So I really want to give a thumbs up to DeSantis. Actually, what he's doing is what we Chinese people think is only natural, things we thought you were already doing, but they weren't doing them at all. Here, I have a suggestion for everyone. I think since half of Feng Wei's audience are Chinese Americans, I think if Chinese Americans want to save America, the best way is to start with education. Tell your schools, tell your members of Congress, our schools must also teach the dangers of communism. Because what's the benefit of proposing this? It's hard for them to say no, because communism is toxic. Whether it's the DSA or Black Lives Matter or this thing called Antifa, they don't dare to say they are communist. So that's to say our schools must teach communism. Our public schools must teach communism. They can't say no, because the legitimacy is very high. But if students understand the Soviet Union, understand the CCP, understand North Korea, they will understand American communism because their genes are the same. It's just the form of expression that's different. The way it's presented, the mindset, the logic, they're all the same. So American communism and CCP communism are only separated by a thin sheet of paper.